There, we'll begin. Welcome everybody. Regular City Council meeting, June 8th, 7 p.m. We are missing two council members, Robert Turk and Logan Monson, who are excused. We got enough to do business though, so we'll move forward. Begin with the prayer of thought by Dave Johnson, followed by the pledge.
Our dear gracious Father in heaven, we come before you this night. We are grateful that we can be here to meet for the city council to present the issues within the city, and pray that thou bless thy spirit to be with us to discern the needs and how to move forward. And we are grateful for those who voluntarily serve in the community to better our city and to better our area. And we ask and thank thee for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this council had occasion to review the minutes and the agenda. Are there any corrections or comments?
So I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the Tuesday, May 25th City Council meeting and do I approve tonight's agenda?
Yep.
And the agenda for June 8th, 2021.
I'll second.
It's Bowers and Nelson, all in favor?
Aye.
It's everybody. Okay. Any declarations of conflict on here? Hearing none, we move right into public forum. Is there anybody wishing to address council on any item that is not on the agenda? If so, now is your moment to speak. We will hear. Seeing none there. We'll move right into reports. I'm going to report that I'm not 30-something anymore. And last time I tried to build a business from scratch, I was 20 and 30-something. It's harder now. So that's my report.
It's good that you're building a business from scratch. I didn't know that.
Well, sort of. It's, yeah, anyway. Is there any
Gosh,
reports
yeah.
from council?
Nope.
Okay. Dave.
Okay,
What do we
so I'll try to be brief. The request for de-annexation, or as the state would call it, disconnect. David Laws has a property that's part in the city, just this little corner, and part in the county mostly. And he laid a slab for a storage unit, thank you. And the corner is in the city and the rest is in the county without any kind of permit. Which kind of brings into question what he's going to do about it. And we can go into more detail later about it. This is more just a report, but essentially what's going on is the zoning doesn't allow for that there. He's surrounded by residential zoning. And although he's partly in the county, his neighbor east of him is looking to annex into the city. And so his only way really around the situation is to annex the whole thing in the city and then go through the long process of trying to rezone a spot zone in the middle where residential's, or in the middle is probably not the best word, but where residential is at. Or he can de-annex or disconnect from the city and go into the county. But usually it's not the practice of cities to approve disconnects and de-annexation, because usually you're trying to annex people in the city, especially when the neighbor to the east is going.
Is this a commercial storage unit or a private storage unit?
Commercial storage unit, yep. And he recognizes the issue. We've been working together. We told him what the options are. We told him that the staff is not going to be in support of disconnect. but that is an option that he could bring before the council. So he has requested to do that. He sent a letter to do that. It requires 3 weeks of, technically it's on him, but as a city, we're going to work with him to public notice 3 weeks in advance every week before a public hearing that has to come before the council. So that you're aware, likely the last meeting in July. It could be the first meeting in July if we get the timing right, but I wanted to inform the council first. We'll be having a public hearing for that disconnect, and then the council can make the decision in that same meeting for a business item. So, and I guess my question to you is, would the council like to have a general discussion about disconnect and annexation before that meeting? Not specific about him, but just general philosophy about annexation and disconnect. That's kind of what I'm curious about. So,
Yeah,
Since I haven't served on the planning commission, I don't know.
we could have that in our very next meeting.
that's what I'm.
And then we
looking
can get
for,
into the details of this specific request, maybe in the same meeting or in the subsequent one. Either one, we'd have plenty of time.
Okay.
It sounds like I've had a discussion with Brett about some of this, but it sounds like some of it's, the context of some of that seemed like it might have changed a little bit since we talked about it. Maybe I'm just mixing up my
Your brain's probably frazzled from the starting the new business.
slightly anyway.
This season.
So, yeah.
So
we need to,
see how
when
that
we get to
goes.
that point where we're looking at that, we need to really know the nuts and bolts, and that'd be a good way to do that if everybody's on board.
Yeah, and it's good to talk with the council about what is our philosophy on annexation versus disconnect. I mean, it's so uncommon that I couldn't even find another city to really talk about that with. And it hasn't been done in the entire time that Brett's been here, just because most cities try to go for annexation rather than de-annexation. But there are some extenuating circumstances, so it's something to consider. And the irony is, if he disconnects and then later his neighbor east of him connects, then we'll, as a city, we would just want to re-annex him back in. So things to consider. So, but okay. So the next item is project status report. So it's,
Clarify, yes, we're gonna have a discussion, because it
Yes,
brings up a
we
lot
are.
of questions for me, but. if
Yeah,
we'd
I'll
like to
put it on
discuss
the-
generally.
I already wrote it down to
Oh,
put in the
wonderful.
next discussion at the next meeting. So, so we talked about it at the last city council meeting. You brought the idea of maybe let's have kind of a project list. I put in a brief one there. I really thought about this and talked to staff, just kind of casually. We talked about how to present this. And our thoughts is, rather than bog you down with every little project item that every department has, we focus mostly on capital projects or projects brought to staff by the council, if that makes sense. So it's just focused project list rather than this really long laundry list, because we could really inundate you just with one of our departments on projects that we're working on. So these were some of the main things that we focused and that you highlighted. If there's anything you want me to add to that, please let me know. Lastly, not listed here, but we had 11 declarations for running for office, 2 mayor, and 9 city council declarations. 3 are for the 2-year, 6 are for the 4-year, with 2 seats open. So that means we will have to have a primary
The
for all
rule
the
on
city
that is
council.
any number more than twice the available seats
Correct.
makes the primary.
That's my
And
understanding.
so then it pars down to exactly twice the number of seats.
It does, yeah. Yeah, and we have 2 former city council members running for, and then, of course, 2 of our incumbents are running for mayor as well. So it was great. I think, it's always better for the community to have options and to get support out there. So I sent an email to all of the potential candidates this morning, welcoming them to come meet with me in my office to ask any questions, giving them the link to all of the agendas. My effort prior to the election is to keep them informed about what the discussions are going on here, so that regardless of who is elected into office, they already feel informed about the goings on within the city. So that's, I believe, all I have for report. We will have a need for closed session this evening.
Thank you for doing this project report. This is exactly what I think. I don't want to know everything that everyone is doing, but the things that we're discussing in council that we're not completing or voting
Or
on
that
at
are
a meeting,
pending,
or that
yeah.
are pending, exactly. So thank you for getting that done.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I think it's a great thing too. It's a tool actually I thought about, would probably help us when we meet as staff. So we kind of have an ongoing, what's coming up in the next meetings to discuss. And that's one that'll just help keep top of mind. Oh yeah, council brought this up. Where are we at with that? So it'll be a positive thing, I think. So.
Okay. Finance report, Kim Palmer.
It's the invoice register is in there. If you have any questions about any of those payables that we've done in the last couple of weeks. And then along with that, if you remember last year, we did the fraud risk assessment for the state auditor. We need to do that yearly and submit that to them. We rated just about where we were last year. We are working on improving some stuff, but they kind of changed the questions this year, so it's hard to compare one year to the next as we're going through and improving processes and policies and that kind of stuff. One thing that I would like to point out on that assessment is the number 5, which is a training that council members should log on and participate in. I don't know how long it is. I haven't watched it, but if you had some spare time, she giggles. If you could watch
I bet it's
that.
really exciting.
It's going to be thrilling. We're kind of hoping that we can encourage people to do it after the first of the year when we fill these seats.
So you're saying that's a new thing, or has that been floating around?
I've done it
'Cause I-
before.
Have you?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't think it takes that long. It's just basic government
30 minutes,
accounting.
maybe, half hour.
I don't think it's even that long.
Okay.
We just need, I guess that you're good with that assessment and have any questions on it. I think we just did advice and consent for us to, or for me to go ahead and upload that to the auditor's website.
It's good to me.
Yep.
Sounds like everybody's saying yes.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
that's advice and consent. Okay. You're not doing very good on water, Terry.
Because it's all on.
Sorry.
I mean, on the report, you want a water report, Mayor? We've got some.
You tried to get out of that.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, questions? There's really not a lot to say. If you look at the annual precept, 66% of average, so not good. Seems like the governor's on board with getting more water, so maybe he can conjure a miracle that we haven't been able to locally. I don't know.
I don't know. I am just glad that the fourth reservoir is not this 800 acre feet that it used to be.
Yeah. Not bad.
And all of the other things that we've done on water improvement over the years. Are we, in conjunction with the water report, we won't have a lengthy discussion, but are we making some headway on our prospects for the deep well that would integrate on above the system?
I don't know that we are. When last I talked to USDA, they said they expected all the EQUAC funding to go to Midwest after the polar vortex. And I haven't had any more conversations.
There were a
on
couple of
it.
things though that were specific to water projects and
There were, I was actually, looking at some of those. What I'm gonna try and do is I'm gonna try and put together with Terry and Kim a list of different grant opportunities and what we need to do in the next steps to make those. But to be honest, Mayor, I haven't been able to dive into those very deeply yet, so.
well, I know everybody has lots of stuff on their plate, but as you look back over the history of Blanding City Council meetings, the number one topic is water, way number one. And then number two by a long margin above anything else is dogs.
Initially, our thought was when the ARP funding came, maybe perhaps that's something we could use toward it. But then in talking, Kim actually had a couple of really great ideas that maybe we could use that funding in a different way that would be equally beneficial and maybe pursue the deep well through CIB and some of these other things. And so that's something holistic.
Well, yeah, I want
Yeah,
to-
what's the best approach?
When we have a little more solidity to some ideas, I'd like to, when you're there, throw it on the agenda and bring us up to speed on where we are.
I was just gonna say, it looks like just from the early information we're getting on the ARP funding is that we can actually use our funding as a match to a state grant that they will be providing for those kinds of infrastructure kinds of things. We couldn't use it towards anything with USDA because we can't use it as a match to federal dollars, but we can use it towards some of the state grant funding that's available out there. We're just waiting for the rest of that information to come through on that
Okay.
as a match.
Well,
That
let's
would be a good use
Put it
of
on the
it.
top of our project. I didn't read down through the whole list. Maybe it was on there.
Yeah, no, I listed on that list, it was more some of the smaller things that we had talked about. I hadn't listed that, but
Okay.
it's on the top of my project.
I agree with
list,
him. Let's
so-
put it on the project list. Let's not let it.
Have it stare us in your
Yep.
face.
Yeah.
I don't want to get in the middle of your report, Terry, but we are getting several phone calls from residents as to, what are we doing about this water shortage? And is there any water regulations? Can we water? Yesterday I talked to a gentleman for about 15 minutes about how much water I thought he needed to put on his lawn. And I kept saying, I'm sorry, but I'm not an expert, but just keep trying, you'll find the right mix. But we are getting,
If it's a little brown and splotchy, you're right there. That's probably pretty good.
so it's positive that people are concerned, I guess.
Mhm. Okay, anything else on water?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grand awards, Pratt Red.
Right.
Here. Guess I don't need to look at it. I've got the idea here. Is there any questions on that?
Are we talking about
Go to it should be
your
an
staff
FIG.
report?
Yeah,
Because I don't see anything in it, like this says grant awards. But then your staff report is talking about event vendor booth policy is what I've got in the
Mhm.
oh,
packet.
there's
That's
three
next
separate pages. What?
So we're talking about page 16, yeah.
16.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, right there. The OHV grant. Yep,
Yeah.
that's right, 125, sorry. I went too far. It's on
Yeah,
me.
so we had, let's see here, sorry, I'm trying to find it as well, but it's not on the
On
same
this?
pages, yeah. Anyways, I'm not exactly sure how the FIG grant came about. I know that he talked to the mayor, Chad Booth talked to the mayor first, and then it came, I think maybe to David, then to me, or came to me anyways, came to the right person eventually. That's been a pretty easy grant. We were able to fill out some paperwork. We virtually act as a third party there where we will receive the funds, but we'll be paying the company to do the actual mapping and everything. And I had a conversation with them today, hopefully in the next week. Next week or the 18th is when they're planning on coming, and they'll do a couple different things there. They'll map those, and then I need to get together a team of locals for them to kind of talk about some of the trails and things of that nature. And then they're going to film that to create the commercial spots and create some of the content for that. So overall, really awesome opportunity. It's, as you can see, roughly $40,000 worth of marketing for free on our end. So lots of publicity, and they've got quite a following. So overall, we're pretty excited about that grant. And then
Can I just add one
On
thing?
the, do you have in mind some of the people you'll be contacting that will be talking about trails? Because I mean, you want to have the spirit involvement in.
Yeah,
there, so
Brent was gonna be my first call tomorrow. I found out about this around 3 before I
So
headed
we're
out.
finally
for a-
getting some dates on that, because he called me the other day wondering, where are we? And,
Yeah, Spear was gonna be my first call to see what their thoughts were and then go from there.
And the two trail segments I think we should do is recapture rim and the Highway 95 down the comb.
We're gonna do the ones that they've strongly suggested, the recapture rim, River House Ruin, and Arch Canyon.
We can go down the comb to get to Arch Canyon. and-
Yeah, I mean, you could go from Arch to Canyon down to River House, things of that nature.
Yeah, because he was talking 3, but he's usually not dealing with the county that's this expansive. It takes a
Yeah.
long time to get from here to there. So anyway,
Okay, I will keep that in mind and we can go from there. But overall, it's a digital map for people to download. It's a Google View map where they can actually just drag and follow the trail digitally before they ever come ride it. And then different facts and things of that nature. So overall, really awesome. The Thrive 125 grant was a really simple grant from the state. We had originally looked at doing the fall festival, but we figured with the 4th of July coming around, we went with that and we didn't have to change any themes or anything of that nature. Luckily, the $3,000 we were awarded, we can take $3,000 from our overall grant fund and use that. So it's kind of a 2-for-1, but it works out really well. So the main thing behind that is mostly just inclusion, and as you know, the entire Four Corners attends our 4th of July or our Independence Day celebration. So overall, we are very inclusive and we have quite a few people attend and of all different race and religion and creeds and everything of that nature. So they were happy to fund that for us. We'll have to report back on what it went to. They said it can't be fireworks, so they're going to help.
It can't be fireworks? Is that
Yeah,
what
they
you
said for safety reasons. So they're probably going to help pay for the band and
You knew we were gonna
awards
ask
and-
that.
different things. So
But if the money can go towards other things, then we can.
yeah, they said whatever else. They just said for safety reasons, we prefer it not to go to fireworks, and fireworks are fun anyways. So we have plenty of other things to spend that money on. But overall, these have been, they weren't too time sensitive, and we were able to get these done, and everything's worked out well. And it's always nice to have funds coming in that aren't depleting our funds. So win-win for everyone.
So on the trail grant, is that, in the end, will it be an online trail system that's open to the general public? It won't be a paid-for system.
No, yeah.
It'll just be something that everyone can
It
use.
says they'll have their own websites, each
So
trail.
at your leisure, if you're familiar with At Your Leisure, they do a Saturday or Sunday morning show on one of the local news. They have another website that then directs people to outsiders.zone, and that's where all their trail mapping is done. So there's currently, 20 or 30 trails on there already throughout the state. So we'll be featured there as well, along with the commercial spots. And then we'll be able to also take the content and put it onto our site. So it'll be kind of in 3 different places. It'll be on
What day
TVs, it'll be on the digitally, and then our website as well.
you mentioned the date, but what day of the week is that?
They haven't locked in a date. They said next week, which I think is the 14th through the 18th. And so he said he's hoping to get down here. He said the 16th through the 18th is what his plans were. But he said for sure they would like to be here by the 25th of June, by that next Friday. So within the next 14 days is their plan. They want to get here before everything.
Because I really wanted to guide them on these trails, but there's a high probability that I'll be
tied up.
I'll be doing other things.
Okay. Well, as soon as I know that he didn't have his mapping individual in his office at that time, he said, I'll get with him and call you back before the end of the week and lock in a date. And so as soon as I
So
know,
what days of the week are the 16th through the 18th?
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
I might be able to squeeze in Wednesday, Thursday, and then the next 10 days I'm out. So
Yeah. Well, as soon as I know,
I'll give you a call.
Okay. I'm either available or I'm not, but I sure would like to be.
And as if you want, we could push them to like September, but I would rather
Sooner
them
the
get
better.
it done and
Yeah.
not forgotten about, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Great
Thank you.
news, thank you.
Well, let's see. Where's our public hearing information here?
17.
Can I skip it? Oh, that's
I'll
it.
just click
That is it. Okay. We need a little information on this and then enter the public hearing, or just enter the public hearing and then you'll inform us? Let's do that. Let's take a motion. to enter
I
public
make a motion that we enter public hearing.
I'll second.
It's Perkins and Nielsen, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Okay, we're in public hearing for the fiscal year 21 budget amendments. Kim Palmer, you want to give us a brief summary here?
Sure. We don't have to do this very often because not very often we need to open the budget and make an amendment, but due to the COVID funding, we need to open that budget of fiscal year 2021 so that we can add those revenues and those expenses to that budget so that we can spend them, and we are recording them and tracking them and reporting them the way we need to. There is also in that resolution that's coming up later, the transfer of funding from the general fund to the capital projects fund to keep that under the now 35% limit. It has been 25 and the state recently raised it to 35. So we need to make that, that's part of that amendment. And we have spent all of the CARES Act funding and we'll start running with the ARP funds, and we should get a draw on that in July, August sometime, and then again February-ish, and we have accounted for that, so that's the background on that.
Okay, are there any questions from the audience or comments on the information presented?
Sorry, I don't see any notes in here about any amendment for the change in the savings percentage? You said you were.
That's on the resolution, it is just, that's just
Under
an
the business
internal.
item section.
Oh, I got you, okay.
Resolution.
This is just, okay, got it.
That's just-
This is just the public hearing portion.
yeah, it's the very last page. It's broken up.
Well, hearing no comments from the public, I'll accept a motion to leave the public hearing.
Make a motion to leave the public hearing.
I'll second
It's Nielsen and Bowers, all in favor?
it.
I,
Okay, moving ahead. Event vendors. I think I'll let Cheryl run with this with my preemptive statement that is, I agree with Thomas Jefferson when I won't get the quote exactly right, but he says, I would much rather have the inconvenience of too many liberties than the inconvenience of too few. So that's my opinion in a nutshell. And Cheryl, you want to run with that?
I think we're in agreement on that then. No, it came up, I don't know if you guys remember, but this came up before and I don't know if it was last year, one other event, this had come up. We briefly
2018.
discussed it and we couldn't, and I knew that we were going to talk about it again, and it didn't come up until the Republican Party reached out to Logan and I to say that they were told that they could not have a booth at our 4th of July event. Come to find out, there's a policy that says there's no booths have to do with
It's a
religion.
guideline. It's not a written policy. It's
A
a
guideline, but
It
it's
was
in
a
big bold
city
letters when you
press.
go to sign up for a booth. Religion and political party, and there was one other one.
just
And just businesses. So essentially, the booths are designed with the event historically to have craft booths or food booths. There's not been a general booth area for anyone. And so religion, business, and political parties can hold a craft booth or a food booth if they meet those criteria. There's nothing preventing them. But if they want to hold just a booth for religious, political, or business purposes, the city has not provided those types of booths. And so the discussion,
Pen and place.
2018 is when,
Well, when they officially did the policy, but historically, it's always been
Just
those
curious,
two types of
When a lot of
booths.
that Bears Air stuff was going on, there was definitely groups there that were.
that's what guided,
Well, and that's what
guided the
prompted it.
change.
That's
There were a lot
what I
of-
was getting at. I was wondering if that's.
There were a lot of people that complained because they didn't like the tone of the celebration because it got really ugly and nasty.
And
And I understand that, and I understand defining the character of an event and saying we want this event to look like this and feel like this. But this event in particular is always the core event is to
It's
celebrate
about
our freedom.
freedoms, right?
And that is why I thought of the Thomas Jefferson. I would rather experience the inconvenience of too much liberty than the inconvenience of too
So
little.
Well,
That's-
and let me just, real
Yeah.
quick, so I completely agree with you, and my concern is that as a city, I don't want to be a council member that's known for restricting our freedom of speech on the 4th of July when we're celebrating our freedoms. So I want to make sure that policy, it does not have my name on it, that guideline, whatever it is. I want to make sure as a city council member, people understand that I don't back or support that guideline. But two, I think that the Republican Party, they were very upset at first, and you've helped them. You've done a great job. They feel much more comfortable, but they agreed that they believe any political affiliation should be able to have a booth at our 4th of July because that's freedom of speech and that's what we all believe in. So they were very open to the thought that maybe this could open a can of worms, but they said that's what these booths are about. And they wanted to really have a booth that was just representing them and who they are so they could get their voice out. So can the Democrat Party, so can the Independent Party or any other party. So I think it's important to discuss whether as a council, we want this type of policy to be in place.
yeah, so I would say.
Or guideline, sorry,
Yeah,
guideline.
I think it's a matter of an event. So that's why we recommended if the council wants to see these types of booths at the event, then let's designate a specific area that's a general area. A good example of like the craft booths, for example, if we were having a battle of the bands at the event, it wouldn't be an opportunity for comedians to get on stage, if that makes sense. Similarly, you wouldn't put in the craft booth area political parties or religious parties. You would create something or an area specific for that. And that's kind of our recommendation is we don't want to water down the intent of the craft booths or the intent of the food booths. And so usually what cities will do is they'll designate certain areas for the different types of booths. So those who want to go to the general booths can go there. And like I mentioned, any of the booths are open to any kind of organization as long as they meet the criteria within those types of booths. So I don't see a problem with it either. We just wanted to get feedback from the council. Do you just want a big free-for-all kind of booth area? Or would you prefer us to designate a certain area, not allow it at all? That's the policy direction that we're looking for, is how would you like us to structure it?
Well, okay, so people, the celebration, it's a big kind of a picnic theme, and that's the character of what we do. So the craft booths and the food booths. So you have the craft booths clustered here and the food booths clustered there, so you know where they are when you go, and then you have everything else clustered, on the other side of the sidewalk or whatever. It's all still the same park, and it's all still right there together. But I understand people's concern that maybe some people can get nasty and do ornery things and be politically, distasteful. So what? That's the risk you take to have a free society. And so, yeah, we can say, well, here's the craft booth. So if you're looking for crafts, they're there together. You don't have to, it's like a trade show. They cluster common trades together. That makes sense. I don't want it to be perceived as the free speech designated area.
Right.
The free speech designated area, in my mind, is the United States of
And it's
America.
similar, if you take out the political organizations, if you
It's
have
other.
like a kids activities area, you wouldn't put those trying to sell things in that area. You would kind of designate them in a location, and just for ease of
Like if
the
the
public to
4-H
know.
wanted to do a booth, or
Right.
the LDS missionaries
Yeah.
wanted to do a booth, which we've been restricting in the past, which I'm not for either. Or any other religion that wants to put put up a booth. I'm not for restricting those either, but you know, that I agree. I like another area could be for those kind of things.
Yeah, if I can just say two things. I don't want someone to think that I hate religion and political things.
We don't think
This
that.
was guided from complaints from our public, so that is where that intention came from. One of the things the mayor has taught me is the word synergy. I think we can find that balance of having a booth, and mostly it's like, you know, Dave's saying as well, if I'm in the craft area, I don't want to be necklaces, homemade honey, Republicans, Democrats. So I think it's nice to have at least a section where I know I'm going to get information, I can get food, and I can get crafts. You know, whether it's a separation of 5 feet or not, at least it's just a common theme as you weave through the park is all that I ask. You know, I think that's a really simple way to make that happen, but I'm open to whatever. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't.
I think most of the time, most of the groups are going to be perfectly respectable and dignified and respect each other's booths too. The one year it didn't, and so then I think that was a knee-jerk reaction to that. And so, oh, we don't want to have that. No, we don't want to have that, but I'll live with it. Because that's what we're about.
What we really need probably is a policy for if there is a group that gets out of hand or violates
Yeah.
rules, or
Yeah.
that group would not be welcome back. But
And we had a similar, 2 years ago, we had an issue with an individual that had a 2-story booth and they would not take it down for fireworks, and we had to get
oh dear.
police involved to, you know, so, and he's never been invited back, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think that's a great way to make all of that work very well, is the policy not stating who can't, but what behaviors
Would
would
keep
not be
them from
allowed.
coming back,
Right.
yeah.
Well, and we do have the challenge that because the city is who's sponsoring it, there is the perception that means that, let's say that just the Republicans show up, that means that we're a Republican city and we don't care, you know, like, even though we're saying that it's open to everyone, there is that perception that we're sponsoring one particular party. And I know that we're saying that the other parties would be welcome, but that is something we do have to think about, because we could potentially have complaints.
Well, and then if we have
that same
complaints,
way.
you say it's welcome, where everyone is welcome. The Republican Party signed up. I mean, I hear the same thing with food and with craft vendors. People are saying now, well, my craft isn't good enough because there's not a booth for me, not realizing there's not enough space, you know, so.
Well, and that's an issue too.
Yeah.
We have grown so exponentially over the years. Do we have space? Do we make space
Yeah.
for something that's not really what we're trying to do at the park? I don't know.
So one thing I just want to add to the conversation is looking at it beyond even the 4th of July event. Just keep in mind that there may be some events that the city wants to do where we have vendor booths of sorts, or where we don't want that type of thing. So for example, if we're doing a kid activity and there's kid booths and we're doing a kid event, it's okay for the city to set criteria for certain events and what kind of booths we want to welcome. It's actually okay to not allow for those types of booths at the 4th of July, as long as those types of organizations can participate in the manner that meets the criteria. Now, I'm not saying we are doing that. You can do it either way. It's just, I'm letting you know that it's okay to do that as long as all parties are allowed to participate if they meet whatever criteria it might be. So like if we did a battle of the bands, a gospel band, a GOP band, or whatever, they could all participate. I'm just making up something random. So you kind of get, I'm giving it a silly example. So you kind of get that, like saying the fall festival, we just don't want to necessarily have those type of booths maybe at our fall festival, because we're focused on family activities and things like that, or a Christmas thing where we have Santa coming. We may not necessarily want those types of booths. So I'm speaking broader. So I think this discussion is just in general, are you comfortable with having a designated area like that with the 4th of July? I'm kind of getting that consensus, but I want you to be aware that we're not violating any constitutional, we're not creating any constitutional issues by not allowing it, as long as we allow everyone to participate in the way that meets the criteria. Sorry, that was.
No, and I understand that, and they're gonna add, the Republican Party's gonna add food to their booth, and they're being allowed to have a booth, but for me, it's the concern of us saying, on the 4th of July, when we're celebrating our freedoms, we aren't gonna allow this booth, or this party, this type of person, or this type of person to have a booth, and that's my concern. And if we need to take it to a vote as a city council, maybe we need to do that, I don't know. I don't think since it's a guideline, we need to do that, but I just, and I also think Fall Festival, I mean, I've thought a lot about this. I think Fall Festival, you're right, but if there's someone who really wants to sign up and have a booth, why are we restricting them? If they're going to take the time to come set up a booth, even though Fall Festival wouldn't really be a place for a political party to be, is that our place to restrict them, or is that the freedoms that we want to have in our city?
I like what you're saying about what was driving my initial thoughts and reactions was the behavior. So I think if we, set up something with the behavior, then that's what sets, for me, that's my concern, right? Is I'm running the event and I turn around and there's someone fist fighting because their president didn't win and they're rolling on the ground. I'm just like, really, on the 4th of July, Day of Freedom, and we're fighting about freedom. Like, well, come on, but then you have the ability to say, kindly leave, you signed this, you agreed to this policy that's a real policy backed by the council.
Well, and what I was getting at too was, in a similar way that we're saying at the 4th of July event, we want these types of booths, we want to designate an area where we can have general booths and things like that. It's okay to say, we're going to designate certain city events where we allow those types of booths, and have certain city events where we may not necessarily want those types of booths. It's okay to pick and choose that, as long as everyone's allowed to participate in the way that meets that criteria. So that's really where
when this crept up a couple of years ago, I came in and visited. So Pratt's he's stepping out there and falling on his sword for this, but there was a conversation with Jeremy, and he's the one that I had the conversation with. And I want to throw Jeremy under the bus either. They had a lot of complaints because they got out of hand. But it was the behavior that was out of hand, not the fact that they existed and had opinions. That was fine. The behavior wasn't good, and people complained about it. And so this decision got made then, and then and I said, well, we're going to talk about this, but then we had, Jeremy's leaving and COVID comes in. And so we didn't have any of that conversation. So I really appreciate that it's come up and that we can say, this is what we want it to look like. So
I'm getting kind of a general consensus. Councilmember Nielsen, I didn't really get any comments from you or hear any comments from you, but I'm getting kind of a consensus that let's designate an area that we can hold those kind of booths. I don't know if there's time to do it this year. We can look at that when talking to the committee and prep, but did you have anything that you wanted to add or say? So, okay. Yeah, and what we can do is, as we plan events, we can see, well, what's appropriate for this event. And I 100% agree with you. It makes sense at a 4th of July event to allow people to express freedoms of religion and political things and things like that, because that's the intent of Independence Day.
In the past, we've allowed people running for council to have booths where they are giving out information, but they were always in a different spot from where, like it was.
So they're not next to each other, yeah.
Well,
We're gonna fist fight.
but I mean, they didn't have their tent right in between the two popular food vendors. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like they were over to the side, and I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
People can go find that booth where it is, but not be directed to that booth because it's right in between the two best food vendors or the two best craft vendors. And then the other person that's running or the other party is out in the middle of nowhere. And then, so I think that separation is a good idea.
That's a good point. I was thinking the problem is if you put all the others into one section, is everybody going to avoid that section? And then it's not worth it for their time and effort, because it's a lot of work. But you're right. You don't want to play favorites or look like you're playing favorites of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In my mind, with the planning, the reason we wrapped the craft booths up around the basketball courts was so they could stay open later as it got darker and the fireworks, they could sell up until the fireworks. You just extend it down that line. So they would be at westernmost part of the park, but I mean, 60% of the crowd comes from that way, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And anyone that wants information is gonna walk up there either way, they've got time, so.
Yeah,
I'm not like, we're not gonna throw them on a baseball field, far away. It would seem,
see, that park is really a
It
good
would be
spot for all
seamless,
all booths. Yeah.
it would just be on one end, so very
Okay.
easy to make it work.
How is this
Sounds
listed on
good.
the, are we considering, how is this listed on the agenda? Can we discuss this with the vendors? Yeah. So are we considering possibly allowing more craft booths if you don't have more food booths sign up? Or did you fill the food booths?
We only have one food booth open, one food truck open, and they'll fill out. But I mean, if they don't, I can open up 2 craft booth areas, but they'll fill up, I'm guessing, so.
Right, okay.
I guess actually, when you brought up the council member thing, we'd have to talk about it, but I mean, we can look and see if maybe we can open up a general area, because maybe that would be a great opportunity with so many people running, if they wanted to have a booth there or something.
I don't think it hurts at all to open that up and say, hey, this category is now open.
Is there room?
It's the other category.
Oh, yeah, you said
Yeah,
yes.
for this one, I would just say this year, it's a general area, it's with timing, it's free.
It's the bottom line.
You're not getting power.
Whether somebody has a
No.
booth or not,
Right.
they can put a signboard on and wander around and talk to people.
With over their head and the
I
front
was
and
just
back.
picturing the same thing. With a
I
bell.
can't wait to see your signboard,
It's gonna
Cheryl.
be great. I'll make a dress or something.
Out of Minky. It won't be hot at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. Are we good on that?
Yes.
It's good discussion.
good
thank you.
discussion.
Moving on, residential zone frontage and residential units in commercial zones. Brett,
Mayor and council, did you get a chance to look at that letter from the planning commission?
Yes,
it
just.
came
now.
out and I glanced at it and without looking at the details of it, I like the idea of finding ways to increase our housing density where and when it makes sense. How's
So
that for really general and politically correct?
we had a group, and Kellen talked to this a little bit at our last city council meeting, that came in and made a request for a consideration of smaller lots. And
What's the purpose of that? I mean,
They
like,
wanted to do 2 like town style homes, one on each lot. They're
they
not
want to have
connected, but
individual houses, but
So
have them on a
smaller.
smaller lot. So currently, right now in our R2 zone, which is our highest density zone, other than our mobile home zone, we require 70 feet of street frontage. And what we're playing with is the idea of looking at going down to clear down to 40 square feet of street frontage. And 4,000 square feet. So
what is it currently?
70.
70, you might have said that, I apologize.
Yeah, 70 and
70?
7,000 square feet. So we're looking at a possibility of up to 3,000 square feet difference in size and 30 linear feet in street frontage in our R2 zone. We're also exploring the idea of renaming our zone that we have right now, which is our highest density zone, mobile home, to a R3, residential 3. And before anybody panics, we're not trying to tell people they absolutely can't have a trailer anymore, but what we're trying to do is make that zone more inclusive instead of less inclusive. Right now, it's pretty much strictly just mobile home and that's it.
The law still allows for the other things, but I think calling it mobile home zone causes confusion that other things couldn't, like a developer couldn't buy that and then build condos.
And people have a different mental image, when you say that. And so by calling it R3 and still listing mobile home as one of the permitted uses in that zone, it would allow, maybe in the future sometime, we have some older trailer parks around town. Somebody could buy those with the idea, hey, I'm going to put up 2-story condos, or I'm going to do something else in this zone that's allowed. And the state's asked us to be more creative and more thought-provoking. Our planning commission is pretty aggressive, but they wanted to make sure that the mayor and council were favorable to us to exploring these ideas, because Robert is a guy that likes to get stuff done, and he wants to see some changes in some of our land use
Could I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Since this letter was written, we kind of talked a little bit more about it too. It goes from the 70 foot in the R2 and then jumps to 40 foot in the mobile home zone. And maybe we need to even evaluate, since we're looking at renaming the mobile home zone, maybe we have an R1, R2, R3 that's like a 55 foot frontage that allows condos and higher densities, but doesn't allow mobile home. And then an R4 that allows mobile home, smaller frontage, that kind of stuff. So now would be the time while we're evaluating this. Is it worth having a fourth zone? Or should we just maintain the 3 and kind of rework what those frontages are, just in discussion? And like Brett said, the idea of bringing it to the council saying, are you okay with us heading down this road before we get too far?
We're probably looking at a few months. I know Robert doesn't like that, but probably looking at a few months because we need to hammer some stuff out. And then just briefly, I'd like to talk about the commercial zone. We do allow residential development. Actually, right now we allow anything that's allowed in our R1 or our R2 in commercial. And for the most part, that works in some ways, but in some other ways, it doesn't work. And our planning commission's been talking about this for a couple of months. Dave's expressed some concerns about that. Some of our other planning commissioners, Lynn Gasser, has expressed some concerns. And so they've got me thinking. This is really good because I like to think about land use stuff. It makes my juices flow. But I've done some research with other cities. I'm going to be going over that with Dave, and we'll be bringing you some more information. But I think we can look at this in a way that will help landing, but still allow for some flexibility for some of our older areas of the city that have quite a few residential houses in our commercial zone. Some of the other cities that I talked to, if you eliminate residential from your commercial, if they go to refinance or they want to build on or add on, it makes the banks queasy about giving them a loan. And so I think as we move forward, we want to explore this in a way that we can try to make our existing housing stock beneficial, but not have people going in and subdividing our bigger commercial lots that the city spent a lot of money to provide utilities and streets and stuff. So our bigger commercial areas stay commercial instead of being subdivided up into small building lots. That wasn't the intent of the city when they spent the money to develop that infrastructure. It was to develop commercial. And so I think there's a way that we can explore this and come up with some ideas that will be beneficial and helpful and promote the opportunity for the commercial, as well as protect some of those people that have residential developments already in the existing older parts of town. So we're going to be looking at that, but we wanted to make sure that the mayor and council was aware of what we were doing, and you give us a nod, at least to say, you're heading in the right direction. We're not guaranteeing we'll like everything you bring to us, but
So
we like where you're headed.
the big reservation about the commercial zone is right now, any residential can be built anywhere in our commercial zones.
And it's just been caveat emptor. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
you can build there, but be aware.
But yeah, and that can present a problem if someone buys a property and builds a home right where commercial is, where maybe we potentially could have got, like, I'm just making up something, a Walmart grocery store. Well, now it negates the ability to do that in that area because maybe a store like that would have bought a larger swath. But essentially, you don't want residential eating up your commercial zones. And you don't want commercial eating up your residential zones. So the discussion is what we need to establish criteria that identifies if a residential is in a commercial zone, how does it look? Is it allowed on Main Street as long as it's an above a second story apartment? Or do we create a zone that's like a mixed use zone where you have your Main Street commercial coming down, and on the outskirts, maybe you allow for some sort of mixed zoning? Those are some of the things that we're discussing, but Callan, maybe you can add.
It has been quite a lot of discussion, a lot of good discussion. There's not definitely not a consensus yet, but I think it's worth them continue to look at that. And present their ideas. So
It sounds fun. Maybe I'll try to get the next mayor to appoint me to the planning commission again.
sure.
Start all over.
Well, you might have an opening.
My initial thought is I'm not, and just upon initial hearing this, I'm not super supportive of reducing abilities within our zoning, meaning making commercial less usable, because we need homes right now too. And I think people are at risk if they build a home in the middle of a commercial zone. I think it's a risk they'd be taking, but it doesn't mean I'm not open to the idea, because I get the point that there may be areas that could be more open to that and areas that may be less open to that. But my concern with the mobile home thing is that do we then risk people coming in and buying up those mobile homes and getting rid of them? I mean, because I want to expand it. Originally, I thought, oh, that sounds great, let's do that. But are they going to get rid of our mobile homes? So we have people who need those mobile homes, who need to live in those,
There's
live
an
where they
option,
are.
there's an option for that to happen. And you were just talking about that discussion of the free enterprise system and how you believe in it. And this is a reflection of that in your land use. So with that opportunity to do more things, somebody could buy up some of those old mobile home parks and get rid of them. Does that not dictate that we still don't need low-income housing? We absolutely do, especially for our businesses, because a lot of our businesses need to have people that can afford to work and pay their rent and buy groceries for $15 an hour or $12 an hour. So we definitely need that low-income housing in our community.
Increasing the density helps with the low-income housing question, and it helps a lot with water consumption. And those are two things that are pretty important.
And another part is, so with economic development, actually a density factor comes into play, a population factor. Heads in beds equals, businesses' interests in opening, how many people live in the area. So it's creating that balance, and kind of similar to what we talked about with the event, designating, we want this in this area and this in this area. That's what we're doing, is we're designing our city. How do we want the look and feel to be? Where do we want our businesses to be and our homes to be? And if we have a mix, where do we want that to be and how do we want that to look and feel? Low income housing, we want to make sure that we're providing for it. And so that's really what this discussion is about, is that's what the Planning Commission's really been looking into, is how do we create a balance that helps us as we move forward into the future.
I do like the R2 residential changes.
I appreciate the work the Planning Commission does and you. I think we have a beautiful city, and I think we're thoughtful about how we do things, so.
All right, so I'm taking that as a yes to go ahead and bring back some information to you. Right, do you have any other comments that you want
It
to
would
add?
be good to hear their thoughts on how do we ensure that it doesn't take away our ability for low-income housing for those mobile homes?
Well, I think,
Could it
the
include
concern
something
you have
that-
though is already exists, because those other uses are already permitted in mobile home.
So somebody could already buy that mobile home and build a condo?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been that way already.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought,
That's not
so we were
changing.
just changing the name of it.
Exactly.
Oh,
So people
Yeah.
understand it is
When-
broader
when
than
Dick
just.
Everson-
Okay.
When Dick Anderson did his project up there, 10 years ago now, 15 years ago, we changed it so you could do apartment complexes, and you could already do R1 and R2 in the mobile home zone.
And so
Okay.
potentially
Just changing
someone
the
could
name.
buy a mobile home property and build an apartment complex with 30 apartments that might provide more need for lower income housing, so.
So
Gotcha. No, that makes it
as
easier.
we go forward, Cheryl, one of the things, as the cost of everything just keeps going up, land and everything else, the big cities, what they do is they have to subsidize low-income housing. They do it through housing authorities and other things. And we have some of those down here on First East. We have those, there's 4 houses built down there. And the houses were expensive, but they're subsidized so the people that live in them paid less rent than what it would cost on the open market. And the Grayson apartments are kind of that same way. And that's as you move forward, that's almost how you have to address it, because if you leave it 100% of the free market system, you're not going to get very many developers that they're looking at the bottom line, the bottom dollar. And I'm not saying that they don't do any of it. Sometimes you can get them to do one for every 20 units or something like that, if you give them a higher density, but.
And what the concerns I'm hearing are that we have our low-income housing that's working through programs like that. And then we have, but everything's getting really expensive and there's kind of an in-between missing. And I think some of these solve some of those issues. So I think that's good.
This is gonna take a little while, so if you get comments from the public, hey, the city's not moving fast enough. We wanna do this right, so we don't do something that we're back in here in 6 months or a year or two saying, we probably should have thought about that a little different. We wanna hopefully address it in such a way that is positive, but it doesn't do something that we don't wanna have.
Are we
happen.
slowing people down who want to
Well, right now,
start
they're not
building?
able to because.
Right, I know, but is there someone who's come to you with a project that will be slowing down if we take too much time?
There's always people that come to us with projects all the time, and we have somebody that would desire to build some of these condos
If we make this change?
if we make this change. And we feel, with our economic development plan and with our general plan, it talks about having all variety of housing. And so we want to explore these different options and see what we can do in a way that will be positive for the community heading forward.
Just trying to slow people down if we can avoid it.
I think that's part of the intent, because actually where they're looking to build is zoned entirely commercial now, and it doesn't allow for the frontage. So everything where the code is now, it is actually creating roadblocks. So that's what's slowing them down. But it also takes time to make those changes. So either way, there's some roadblocks that we're trying to work through to help.
Yeah, we're trying to make that effort.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. Okay, Wellness Center occupancy. I got a little primer on this and they.
Yes, so Mayor and Council,
It's a little
during
frustrating.
COVID, we were trying to determine for events and for when volleyball started, what are we allowed to have, as far as social distancing. And so we saw that the posted sign for occupancy in the wellness center said $299 for the whole building. And I said to David, I said, that's really low. So both of us started researching it, thinking, what do we do about this? And what I assumed was that it was probably based on the type of use, like if there's games on the court, maybe 100 players and coaches and 200 spectators. Maybe that's what they were thinking. So Brett brought me some state code that showed based on the type of use. So you could use more space if you were having a banquet or if you were having an assembly per square foot based on the number of doors, but it didn't give all the calculations. So we reached out to the state fire marshal to say, well, how do we get these calculations? And he said, oh, just send me a layout and I'll give you the calculations based on each use, games, banquets, vendor, expo type things. And we sent that to him and he's like, I can have these to you in 10 minutes. Well, he assigned one of his deputies and the deputy called me and said, I think I know why your occupancy is only $299. And we went and looked at what he was suspecting. And sure enough, because the building was built without a fire sprinkling system, we indirectly agreed to basically cap our occupancy for the whole building at $299, because a building that size should have a fire system. Building half that size should have a fire sprinkling system. And so legally, while this news really, it was not what David or I were anticipating at all. We thought they were just going to give us the calculations.
Yeah.
As he said, with a building that size, we should be able to have upwards of 1,400 people in that building. But because we didn't build it with a sprinkling system, that's why it says $299. It throws all the use calculations out the window. And although that's really cruddy news, and David and I are going to have to work through how do we mitigate that with our events and even just sports and things. The positive side, if you can see a positive side, is if we had had some sort of accident or fire there and there was more than $299 and we had a death or something like that, one, we would have been out of compliance. And two, our insurance likely wouldn't have even covered it. And if we got sued, we would have nothing to go on. And so it's really good that we've actually caught this situation. We don't know the answer. At first, I was just gonna bring this to you as a report, but I thought if you want to have some discussion on it, my thoughts are, there's a few ways you can approach this. We can look at grant funding. We can look at CIB funding to say, hey, we need this fire system or this sprinkling system. Can we get funding? Maybe some match funding. You could also look at the long term. Eventually, there will be a point where you probably need to expand the wellness center. And so if you're going to expand the wellness center sometime in the future, that would be the time to add a sprinkling system as well, because you could roll it into the general cost. I mean, right now, costs are so up and everything anyways. And the estimate that I got, it's not like an official bid. It's an estimate based on if we needed every little thing possible. That would likely come down, and hopefully costs will come down, but there's no guarantee of that either. So in the interim, what we're going to probably have to do is for our events, we're going to probably just have to limit number of spectators per like athlete or whatever thing we're doing. If we have another event that's like a city event, we probably have to work with, we're probably going to have to work with the school district to maybe.
Just off the camera, David Palmer's back there putting a noose around his neck because he's going to be the front man for this. It's not.
Well, and we're not, I do not plan to leave David out there to hang on his own. Okay, this is not something we expected. This is not something that's anyone in the rooms necessarily. It's no one's fault per se. I don't know why it was built without a sprinkling system.
Well, I don't recall any specific discussion about it. But I suspect that it was just a cost-saving measure back in 2008, 2009, where they're going, we can get this thing under the budget if we do this. And so the architect is probably doing that, and I don't know. There may have even been a discussion that I just don't recall.
The fire marshal said he sees this quite commonly for the exact reason where a city or a business will try and cut costs and not realizing what they've cut actually defeats the purpose of why they built the building. So
it may have been that back then we were looking at it and saying,
we may not
when are
have
we gonna
one
have a
300.
banquet over 300 people?
Right, exactly.
And then we have the sportsman for wildlife, that comes in with 600 and something, whatever it is. I don't know the numbers.
So in the interim,
It is what it is, and now we got to figure out.
what we'll likely have to
Where do we
do is probably work with the school district to perhaps rent facilities for if we have city events that we want indoor, that we know we're going to be over that, or there's just a variety of things. So Dave and I are going to really talk about that. I don't know. I think, maybe what we can do is talk about it a bit more, but there's probably going to have to be a few discussions. Oh, that's the last part that I thought of. This year, we're doing our parks, recreation, trails master plan. And in that master plan, in the past, when I've done these types of master plans, we have them specifically look at our recreation center. What's the capacity? What's the number of people coming, the level of service, and what will we need in the next 10, 15 years, or even 5 years? And so what we would have them do is kind of look at that and give us an idea of.
I think we already know. As a council, that's where you do things. That's the only building in town that's big enough to house events. We have to have a sprinkling system in there.
So on that
Sorry.
note, no, I wholeheartedly agree.
Well,
When I got
Cheryl's bringing up an issue of the cost, if we're going to pursue that, and I asked you to come up with a really big ballpark, but we've got our finance director here, just itching to give us something.
Well, I've been looking at numbers because I kind of felt the same way Cheryl did, is that we got this facility, we got to make it work.
We got to find a way.
So I've been
creative.
I've been looking at some numbers. It would take quite a bit of, it would take a good chunk of your savings to do it. But I think before you go down that road too far, we should probably get an actual bid instead of just an estimate, so that we really have numbers to work with. I've been looking at some different things that just with the
Give us
funds
the
that
big
we have.
number, because that makes us
Well,
decide whether
the
we
bid I got
want
was-
where the discussion goes. If the big number's this big, we go, well, that's going to be 2 years.
The bid
after.
I
If
got,
it's this big,
just to
let's go
clarify,
after it.
the bid I got is as specific as you can get without officially going to bid. So we're not gonna, we could maybe get some estimates from some other companies, but he got pretty specific on what would be needed. And it's 291,000 just for the sprinkling system, another 80,000. And this is at most what it would cost right now.
Is that to do the whole building?
The
or
whole
just
building, no, the whole building, 291,000. If we wanted to upgrade the fire system at the same time, 80,000. And then that doesn't include any of the other contract work like drywall. There are options Brett and I talked about. It could be, what's the phrase you use where it's mounted outside of the drywall? What did you call it?
Surface mounted.
Surface mounted, thank you.
Yeah.
So there's other options we can look into, and I think Kim's right. There's savings there, and that's what I meant. Like we staff probably need to talk about it more and figure out what are different funding mechanisms and things that we could pursue.
Well, we
then
definitely
bring
got to
back
get
before
really
council.
creative to see if there is a quicker rather than a slower response to fix where we are. I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah,
It's
I
just-
will tell you, when I
it's-
read the
It's a
estimate,
rough question.
what's that?
Is there anything coming up
Event-wise.
event-wise?
Not until winter.
They've got
That
Wow.
Christmas tree front brings in a ton of people.
That
though.
would be
That's-
first.
yeah.
So
There's
see,
no
then
wrestling,
I think that
no
we-
volleyball, all done? Wow.
I think we also have to look at, we've been super liberal about letting people use the facility for big things. And if it's really gonna cost us $300,000 to $400,000 to put this in for big things, I think we need to start
That's an excellent question.
saying, it's not free anymore. Like, we wanna be a community partner, but we can't afford to.
Yeah,
I
I
make a
actually,
quick comment on that.
Go for it.
If you allow me to. It's not just the big things, even just a busy night of basketball with both courts and a lot of those, we're definitely pushing over that number. I think some of you have probably been there and witnessed that.
In our own program.
So it's regular
In our
city
own
stuff
volleyball
that's
program,
pushing that
basketball
number.
program.
too,
Yeah,
so.
just for league nights, not even out of town teams, just our own league, it can really fill up.
Well, and Katie's question is really pertinent in that, you know, we got to have to look at this from all the angles and really try to get creative and say, where are we and what makes sense and what works? Because the other side of that, kind of a sideline to her comment, is we have an inherent conflict with the large events with the normal use, and we're always trying to balance that as well. So that it's all in the mix in this discussion.
But
And
we
maybe,
should
you know,
start charging.
ignorance is bliss. It's too bad COVID made us think about the number, and it would never ask the fire marshal, and we, you know.
although it is a
But,
benefit because
but the liability there, as Dave explained, it is a good thing we discovered it.
because
The easy way rather than the hard way, because the hard way would have been to have an uncovered major liability event. And
Well,
that-
yeah, the last thing we want is something to happen and we get sued, and instead of 300,000 to 400,000, we're spending $2 million. pay
Yeah,
off
it's,
a lawsuit.
so there's a worst case scenario that is actually worse than the situation is, but it's not fun. This is not a fun place to be.
And I really
That's for
want it to be clear that this really was out of left field for David and I. We were just simply trying to find out what our numbers
So we
were.
push forward exploring what those options may be. Does the council want to, well, I mean, maybe we need to flush out what the approach would be and then say, let's get a bid on that. Maybe we need to come back with the next meeting with a little more financial information so we can massage that and say, where do we want to go?
I've been pulling some numbers the last 3 or 4 days on just the wellness center as a whole. I think it'd be important to look at what we are bringing in, what we're spending, and what we're charging, and what's the potential to bring in enough. You know what I mean? Let's just look at the whole picture would be what I would recommend.
Mhm.
Anything to do with recreation, we probably ought to look at the wellness center specific, because we do have some recreation programs that do use that center that, you know, I think you should look at the big picture. That would just be my advice from a financial standpoint.
The other thing, side note, before this occupancy issue came into mind, and I won't say who because I don't want to commit anyone, but there's some organizations in town that I actually talked to about the future of the wellness center when we eventually need to expand, and perhaps there's an opportunity for partnerships in that. So I was already kind of looking into that, not saying within the next year or two, but in the future, would there be interest in some potential partnerships? And there's interest there, but similar to us, it's more of a long-range plan for something like that. So just more to put
That's
that
a valid point. If we're planning to expand in the future, should we factor that in?
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, so then the other challenge that I have is that the top of our capital improvement projects are other fairly expensive recreation things. And so we can't do all of them. So does that mean that now we go ahead and say, we've been talking about dirt, we've been saying we're gonna do dirt, but we've discovered this other thing. Like, we have to prioritize. We can't say that we're gonna do all of them.
I totally agree.
Okay,
Well, there you are, just being pragmatic and practical and logical. Thanks a lot.
if only it were that easy, I know.
Why are you saying?
Yeah, that's what
The
you get
third
the
is
big bucks for.
$30,000.
No, not just the dirt, but
Everything.
what
All
all
the
the
shade
capital for
structure.
the recreation together was around $300,000. And I think Katie's point is that, do we say, okay, we prioritize and do this first and then look at those things next year or or over the next 2 years so that we can get this done first right away? That, I think that's.
I just think we need to be
Am I
careful that we're not
putting words in your
spending
mouth?
all of our
Capital.
savings or extra funds on recreation over the next 5 years, and we're neglecting sewer issues and we're neglecting street issues. Those things aren't as exciting,
Yeah.
but they're just as important.
Agreed. And we do have separate savings for each of those and the general pot of savings. So, but I
Yeah,
think
they
the
have
point
their-
is, well,
They have funds as well for those types of things,
yeah.
but not capital improvement things. I understand
So-
that. I don't want to hear, I don't necessarily really want to hear no. I want to hear, let's find a way to see if we can make this work. If we can't, we can't. But this is important. This is a big deal.
Yep.
So this would take half of our savings? Is that what you said?
Well,
Pretty dang close.
Just so I can mull it over when we get done. with the
Yeah,
meeting.
it's a big chunk, and then with what you have coming out of next year's budget,
Mhm.
it would be quite a bit. I do have those numbers. I'll be happy to share them or bring them to next meeting and let you, so that you can see them. I didn't feel like that was part of this discussion, so I just kind of left them aside, so.
so can you clarify, is that half of recreation savings or half of our
Your recreation savings between the capital projects and the general fund is about $120,000 just in recreation. Your wellness center has 410, I think.
So it's not general fund savings, this is recreation.
Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah,
That's correct. So in general funds, unrestricted savings, we have, what is it like? Trying to remember off the top of my head.
Well, but
$100,000.
yeah, so you get back to Katie's point of where are the priorities? And you go, oh, well, you got that in the savings and just spend it and do it. Well, that's easy to say until you go, oh, wait a minute.
And
That
how long did
savings
it
is
take
there
us to
for-
save that?
The savings is there for a reason. We build it up over 10 years so that when the pumps go bad, we can replace them.
your
So when, you
general
know,
savings
They're
fund,
there for, they are designated for
Right.
these. It's,
checking account based on the expenses and the revenues coming in and out, that one does fluctuate. But we do have funds designated and restricted for certain items. And the wellness center does have that 410,000 that is designated to them. And then recreation has a total between the two funds of about 120,000.
Okay.
And then we do have some unassigned and capital projects left that we would be, we would need to use, and we probably would use some of that to do your, I say your, but I'm talking council's, projects that are in the budget, the pavilion and the shade structures and those kinds of things would come out of that. So that's what I'm
Come out
saying.
of the
You probably
unrestricted
wanna-
general fund savings?
Out of the unrestricted capital projects.
So what we can do, and also, like I mentioned, we can add this to the CIB funding list and discuss to them our priority with this, because it does serve more than just Blanding City. It's really, I mean, I think we call it the San Juan Wellness Center for a reason, right? It serves really the county in a larger scope. And so I think, Kim and I will go over a lot of those options and perhaps come to you rather than bombarding you with, we'll show you all the numbers, but maybe come to you with a couple different
If CIB
recommendations.
is a valid option, though, it's got to be on the list.
It does, so
That
it still
delays
has
it
to
an
be.
entire year even to discuss it being a CIB item, because it's got to be on the list in order to go make a pitch for it.
That's true, yeah. But I'll talk to them.
So this is what you get the big bucks for, is to try to figure out how to muddle through and,
Here.
We got
That's
two
fun.
prospective council members, maybe they want to withdraw when they're.
I'm gonna hand you a problem right now.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. I think that was last week, actually.
They both look very confident that they can handle it. Okay.
On a positive note, sorry.
Good, do
We-
that.
We are in a position, thank goodness, where we can make something work because we do have the funding to make something work. Maybe not everything we would like to in the way we would like to, but we do have funding. We can take care of the situation.
Right, or
That's a good
proper
point.
planning.
That's a good point.
So, well, anyway, the city's run conservatively financially for as long as it's been a city. And it gives you the ability to have options when things happen. Otherwise, you don't even have options.
Well, and the
And
other,
that's why we have to be careful even using that reserve to make sure we maintain those options. You have some other failure down there and you've just spent your savings now a lot, so
So what would this be
it gets
considered?
complicated.
This would be
Well-
considered a failure in my mind.
so
A big
this,
failure that has to be fixed, and that's why you save, and that's why you have that's why you have funds set aside. I'm not saying we should do everything maybe that we've
Right.
agreed to do, but I just think this may be one of those things we're talking about.
so one of the other things to keep in mind too, with the amount of funding that we have, and this is, Kim and I haven't even had a chance to go through those numbers yet, but that percentage, that 25%, if we were to do that, how does this affect where our percentage is and all of that of our reserves? So we just got to look at the whole, which is kind of what Councilmember Perkins was.
Yeah, we'll figure something out in all of it.
Michelle,
Okay,
So next steps on this?
We're gonna talk, we actually are meeting tomorrow, so we'll probably talk about
About-
some of those numbers and then
yeah.
probably maybe come up with some recommendations.
Do we have to
Next
upgrade the
meeting.
fire system? That would be a question.
Say that again.
Do we have to spend $80,000 on upgrading the fire system? Is
We
that part of it?
don't, but he wanted to give us the price in case for some reason there was a need or if we decided we want to. So there is always the potential. And then we also would have to get rough estimates on the additional contract work like drywall and stuff that would go along with it. So his bid was around 300,000 with everything, which he even said that's high if it includes everything. And then I just said it's probably going to come in between 300,000 and 400,000, depending on who knows what other contract work related to this.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
I guess.
Yeah.
On to other items. Visitor Center RFP. Who's running with that?
Yeah. Let's do it. Making headway here. All right, you guys. We're almost on that second to last page. We're just about there.
Don't jinx us.
There's no box. Oh, no.
We let this run for about 2 months. I did approach twice every single local outfitter from Monticello down to Bluff. That just happens to be the range of where they're at. So I didn't stop there, but that's typically where they're at. The main concern that we had is that people just didn't have the staff, in terms of other people not applying for it. They were worried about having someone there, the opportunity cost of someone being there to book one trip if they could have guided two, and those scenarios. But we did end up with one. Sunrise Outfitters did apply and got everything into us, and their application, everything looked good. I did reach out to the owner of that business, and he didn't make it tonight, but those of you that know him, I think he's probably out working would be my guess. So, great entrepreneur spirit. The recommendation there is that we award Sunrise Outfitters with an 18-month contract. That reason being is we've kind of, in the sense of things right now, there's no way to judge someone fairly in July, August, September, October, and November, throughout the rest of this year. Awarding them for 18 months would give them the rest of this year to kind of figure things out and then hit it hard next year as the tourism season ramps up. We felt like that was a fair opportunity, and then in 18 months we'd be able to revisit that and see if we can't get other individuals or different things in place. I don't know if this being a discussion item, I don't know
Or
if
it's
it
a
has.
business.
Business item. The proposal there was based on the revenue, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it, based on the square footage and the state averages, it was, him paying $80 a month or 2% of his sales, whichever was greater, to have that space. And the space that he has is virtually about a 10 by 10 area. So at $8 a square foot, that is what.
Can you clarify what space it is?
It was the computer room in the visitor centers where they would have access to the storage and everything underneath, but that's not like as beneficial as being upstairs. So that's the space that he's going off, and we felt like that was a fair, we could charge more, do things if that's what you'd like, but I do think that's a very, for virtually one full year, it's a small space, that's a good
The only
opportunity.
caveat to that is we did say that if there's need for storage downstairs in the basement, so that may be one thing to consider. I think what we're looking for today is just the council's a motion of approval to move forward to negotiate a contract.
Okay. I'm not psyched about giving them too much space downstairs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I don't know that they.
I think that would need to be flushed out,
requested it.
to make sure that it doesn't just become overrun,
Not an open end.
Yeah.
Well, basically not open-ended, but like if they needed to store some RZR razors there or something like that, something to that effect, but we'll see what they need. That didn't even mention the need for that in the
Okay.
proposal.
yeah,
so-
it wasn't a concern on their
Okay.
end, so.
I like it. Move forward.
Okay.
I think that's been a wasted space for a while now, and I think it's great that we're finding a use for it, especially if we can help local business in the process. So
Yeah, I think
went
it'd
out to RFP, gave everybody a fair shot.
we did, and it also went to the state website as well, so technically the whole state had a chance, so.
So we would just need a motion to give staff basically direction to move forward into contract negotiations.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So, okay.
That
I'll make,
sounds
okay.
Sunrise
I
Outfitters.
so motion.
You can just say so.
Oh, you were telling me to go ahead. I was like, sure, go ahead. Yeah, let's do it.
I so motion.
And I second it.
Okay, so that's Perkins and Bowers, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're moving forward. Forward is good. All right. Budget amendment resolution.
Funnest part of the whole meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we really, I think we've talked about it. It makes sense. So if you guys are okay with that, I make a motion that we approve resolution 6-8-2021-1, amending the fiscal year 2021 budget.
Just a quick
Sorry.
question before.
Yeah, same here. Go ahead.
Well, get the second and then we'll discuss it,
Okay, I'll second.
okay?
Well, what if he doesn't
No,
want to second it?
You can always withdraw it. I mean, technically you have, if we're discussing, are we discussing the motion or are you discussing something prior to the motion?
Well, I guess my question would be, you talked about the 30, was it the 35% or 25%? Is that gonna, I mean,
So
would affect with maybe the funds you could use for the wellness center? Was that a concern for you? Is that what you were getting at earlier, or?
No, the
Okay.
state changed their guideline that it used to be we could only hold 25% in our general fund at the end of the year. They upped that to 35%.
now we can
And
hold
then
more.
we take the difference.
Okay,
over
that was just
and
my
move it
question. If
into
you were
the
concerned
funds.
about that,
No.
anyway.
So,
okay.
so the $57,000 is because of that change, we're allowed to put $57,000 more into our capital project fund?
Yes.
Then I second it.
Okay, we'll go with Perkins and Nelson and Bowers as a third.
Double second.
So all in favor?
I,
None opposed? None opposed. Okay. Okay, we do need a motion to go into an executive closed session.
So can I just, so what, if we
Yes.
wouldn't have, if that change wouldn't have been done, would we have had to spend that 57,000?
No, we would have moved.
We would have moved
Move it into
more.
So we could leave up to 35% in the.
Oh, you had to move more to the general
More
savings.
to the capital project.
Capital project. So anything that can't remain in the general fund goes to capital
Capital
project.
project.
So it is
I
another
got it.
form of
Okay.
savings.
So you're moving actually less.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
I make a motion that we go into closed executive session or whatever it's called.
Perkins and Nelson, all in favor?
Right?
I,
Okay, give that a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, people.
Yeah, thank you, thanks, everybody. Thank you.